Welcome back, everyone. There's a lot of confusion on fats, am I right? Fat's good, fat's bad. You shouldn't eat fat, it'll give you heart disease. Sorry, we got it wrong and fat's all right. Have you noticed? And Dr. Robert Atkins, his book was #1 on the New York Times best-selling book list 4 years running. And he's known for the guy that got everyone to eat meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs, yeah, with no hesitation on the fats. The nutritionists hated him, the doctors hated him, somebody loved him. It was the people, because they were looking for something that worked. And as I looked at last night, in 1953, Ansel Keys first presented the theory that fat causes heart disease, but it's actually never been proven. In Udo Rasmus's book, Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill, I like the way he defines it. There are fats that are damaging and there are fats that are healing. And because there are some damaging fats, all I can think that a whole lot of fats have all been put into that basket. We've been looking at fats a little bit. In most of the lectures we've touched on it, and I've shown you how that fat is an essential nutrient. The membrane around every cell is 50% fat. The membrane around the brain cell is 70% fat. We need fat. It is an essential nutrient. It's a very concentrated food. We don't need much, but we certainly need some. So what I want to do this evening is I want to do a little bit of chemistry, but relax, because I'm not real great at chemistry, but I'm going to give you a little bit of an understanding of the basic chemical structure of the fats. When you understand the structure of the fats, then you begin to understand how the body uses it, why the body uses it, and where the body uses it, and why it is so important. And we're going to begin with a polyunsaturated fat called omega-3. Everyone's heard of omega-3? Now, what are we told is the highest source of omega-3? Fish. The fact is that no creature can put omega-3 into their fatty acid chain. Only plants can. So why are fish high? They're eating a one-celled algae that is high. Well, we can do better than eating a one-celled algae. We can grind up flaxseed or linseed, same thing, or we can have chia. Chia can just be soaked, and that's an easier way to eat it. The flaxseed needs to be ground. What does the 3 mean? So you'll notice here I've drawn the 80-chain fatty acid that makes up omega-3. And there are 19 trillion of these in 1 drop of oil. So that's the magnification we're looking at. Now, it's a law of science that every carbon atom must be connected to 4 different things. And hydrogen is the one that usually jumps in quickest. So here's hydrogen. But what the 3 means is that the 3rd carbon atom, so that's 1, 2, 3, there's a double bond. Now, whenever you get a double bond, that carbon atom has to let go of one of the hydrogens, because now it's got 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you see that? So these had to go, and they're always repelling each other. So these hydrogen atoms now start to to come over like this. But what that does is that causes a kink in the chain, like that. And flaxseed, linseed, chia have 3 double bonds in their chain. So that's 1, 2, 3, there's another one there, 1, 2, 3, another one there. And remember, these 2 now have to go because of the double bond. They can only have 4 connections, so those 2 hydrogen atoms have to go. These hydrogen atoms start keeping away from each other, and that causes the kink in the chain. So this chain has 1, 2, 3 kinks in it, so it's a very fluid chain. And as a result, it's a very fluid oil. What do the English use to paint their cricket bats with? Is linseed oil, because it disperses so easily. So this is a lovely thin oil. Now this oil is called a polyunsaturated fatty acid. Poly means more than one double bond. Unsaturated because now we have 3 empty spots on the fatty acid chain. Now let's have a look at the effect of double bonds on the body. Double bonds create an electromagnetic field between them. And that's important for us because we are electrical people. There's a spark of electricity in every cell in the body, especially our brain. And Dr. Neil Nedley, in his book Depression: A Way Out, he spends quite a bit of time showing the importance of omega-3 in proper brain function. They are heat sensitive. So the heat is attracted into these empty spots. They are light sensitive. So the light is also attracted into these empty spots, and they act like a magnet to oxygen. What an amazing oil. So when we eat this oil, it means that our electromagnetic field is functioning well. It means that we're able to manage our heat. We absorb more vitamin D. We're able to have more oxygen, and oxygen is the most vital element needed for life. But if that seed is cracked open and that ground seed is put on the bench for a few hours, the light, heat and oxygen are absorbed into these empty spaces, and the oil is spoiled. The oil goes rancid. And so there is a use for your coffee grinder, and it's grinding up that flaxseed in your coffee grinder just before breakfast. Let me give you the omega-3 story. The omega-3 alpha-linolenic acid has 3 double bonds. So that's 1, 2, 3. That's ALA. In the body, ALA, alpha-linolenic acid, is converted to eposationic acid, EPA, and EPA has 5 double bonds. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the body, EPA is converted to DHA, decahexaonic acid, and it has 6 double bonds. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that very fluid oil is used exclusively by the body for cell membrane function and repair, because around every cell in the body is a membrane. And so these oils give a beautiful suppleness, fluidity, and yet strength to the membranes around the cell. So what man does, because in the fish have ALA, convert it to EPA, then DHA, man extracts DHA, puts it into capsules and said, oh, this is far superior because the DHA is already available for you. But if 3 double bonds is sensitive to light, heat and oxygen, how sensitive are the 6? And I question if they can extract it without any exposure to light, heat and oxygen. And so my suggestion is, get your omega-3 from your flaxseed or linseed, from your chia seed. And by the way, the fish that they extract this from are also very high in mercury and dioxin. You see, they are fat-soluble toxins in the fat, and of course this is the fat. That's the omega-3 story. What about sunflower? Sunflower is high in omega-6. 6 indicates the position on that fatty acid chain of the first double bond. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There it is there. And there are 2 double bonds. So 1, 2, 3, another one there. So you've got the hydrogen atoms along here, but remember you've got 2 gaps there because of they keeping away from each other. So you've got an oil that has now 2 kinks. Not as thin an oil as the flaxseed or linseed and chia, but still quite thin. So it's called a polyunsaturated fatty acid. Poly meaning more than one double bond. There's the double bond there. More than one double bond. The unsaturated, because we've got empty spots on the fatty acid chain. What about almond and olive? They're high in omega-9. 9 indicates the position on the fatty acid chain of the first double bond. These two are also 18-chain fatty acids. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There it is there. So you've got hydrogen atoms along here. You've got one. You've only got one empty spot, so you've got one kink. So it's called a mono-unsaturated fatty acid because there's only one double bond. So the mono means one. It's still unsaturated because it's got an empty spot on the fatty acid chain. What about coconut? Coconut is made up of medium and short chain fatty acids, and there are no double bonds in coconut. So every spot is full. And in cold weather, that oil is solid. So that's a saturated fat. And as a saturated fat, it is heat resistant, light resistant, and oxygen resistant. So if you wanted to fry a little bit of garlic or ginger, onion in a little oil, which would be the best oil? It would be the saturated fat because it's heat, light, and oxygen resistant. Which is the best oil? Well, which body function are you talking about? Yesterday we had a look at how saturated fat actually doesn't cause heart disease. And in my first lecture today I showed you where the different fats are broken down. And the saturated fat, do you remember where it's broken down? In the mouth, under the action of lingual lipase. Whereas the polyunsaturated fats, they're broken further down in the gut under the action of bile and pancreatic lipase. So digestive-wise, this is an excellent fat because this fat does not need bile, does not need pancreatic lipase. And if you remember, and I know that I was guilty of information overload, there's the lacteal where it gets taken in. It gets taken not into the blood, it gets taken into the lacteal, part of the lymphatic system, get taken to the thymus, then to the liver, burnt as fuel. It's an amazing oil. Dr. Bruce Fife, he's written many books on the wonders of the coconut oil. I think he should be receiving a Nobel Prize for the work he's done on showing the wonders of the coconut oil. And so, if someone challenges me that we should not be eating oil, my answer is this: let's use the BHSC method, Bible, history, science, and common sense. Let's start with the Bible. What oil is spoken of exclusively in the Bible? The olive oil. And there's a lovely story. I think we've all heard the story of Elijah, and he went to King Ahab and said, "You've got to stop worshipping the idols or God will not send any rain." And then God tells him to hide by the brook. The children love the story because the ravens feed him. And then the brook dries up and God tells him to go to this little town, and a widow there will feed him through the time of no rain. And he finds this lady, she's about to cook some bread. She said, "It's my last flour and my last oil." And then those famous words, he said, "God has said that in the time of no rain," he says, "if you cook me a cake now," he says, "God has said, the meal will not lack and the oil will not fail." So every day when that lady got up, she went to her barrel, there was a little bit more flour there. And she went to her cruse, there was a little bit more oil there. Who put oil in that cruse? God did. And there was another story, and this also is the prophet Elijah. A lady came to him, she said, "My husband's just died, my husband's in debt." He was in debt. and my 2 sons are about to be sold into slavery. So he said, what have you got in your home? She said, I've got a big jar, an olive oil jar. He said, go and get lots of jars. So she went to the neighbours and got these big jugs, and God filled them all with olive oil. And she sold the oil and paid off her debt, and her sons didn't go into slavery. 2 stories in the Old Testament where God shows very clearly that he sanctions olive oil. So there's the Bible. Now let's look at history. History fascinates me, because let's look at the fats that people ate worldwide, say 150, 200 years ago, depending on where you lived. So here's the planet. So if you lived up in the northern countries, so we'll put some lines on the planet. If you lived in those northern countries, Norway, Sweden, they've always had a lot of dairy farms. So they had dairy farms, and so most of their fat came from the cows, but it was raw organic milk, and it was made into butters and cheese. And by the way, there was very little heart disease. And if we come down to the Mediterranean, in the Mediterranean, the ladies would have wooden presses in their kitchen and squeeze the flesh of the olive to get the olive oil. And then if you come down to the equator, you'll find it was the coconut. And women would grate up the coconut, squeeze it with water, throw the fibre away, and that white milk they'd heat, and it would separate into olive oil. The olive oil and the coconut oil are the 2 oils that are extracted from the flesh of the plant. So they're the oils that were predominantly used historically. But it was about 100 years ago they developed high heat chemical equipment to be able to extract oils from the hard seeds. And so when they were able to extract oil from the hard seeds, then the sunflower oil, and then the almond oil, and all the other seed oils, the peanut oil, the soy oils, the grape seed oils. But notice what they used heat. So when you use heat to extract an oil, what are you doing to your double bonds? You're destroying them. So those oils you see in the supermarket shelf, the peanut oil, the safflower oil, the sunflower oils, the soy oils, they're in clear bottles. They were already destroyed before they even got into the bottle, so it doesn't matter they're extracted to, or they're exposed, I should say, to the light, because they're already destroyed. And when this theory came out that saturated fat caused heart disease, people were told, stop the butters, is that right? Stop the saturated fat, it'll give you heart disease. And they created margarines. So when they created margarines, how did they create them? Well, they saturated the molecule with hydrogen atoms, and the saturation also broke the double bond, and that causes a twisting. You've heard of trans fatty acids? Apparently there are countries now that have banned the trans fatty acids, because what happens, it breaks it, and so then you've got it going off in a different kink, and instead of having this fluid, it actually becomes straight, and that bond reconnects, but the lipase, remember I talked about the lipase, the pancreatic lipase, it locks in to break. It can't lock into that, it cannot break up. So now we get this dangerous long-chain fatty acid that's straight, that's solid. If you notice your margarines are solid, it doesn't fit anywhere. It doesn't fit in, and it pokes its way in and damages the cell. Now what we've got with cells, we've got antennas that have cell-to-cell communication. But if this trans fatty acid gets in, it basically pokes out like these, and these antennas can't communicate with each other, and that's contributing to heart disease. It's contributing to damage in the arterial walls, again contributing to heart disease. And when cell-to-cell communication is interfered with, then the cell doesn't have the brakes on it to keep reproducing, and of course that keep reproducing is your cancer cells. This is an incredibly dangerous fat and should never enter the human body. And you'll find it in a lot of foods, like your baked foods, like your donuts, your cakes, your biscuits, things like that. Scary stuff. Let's look at the planet. So your saturated fat here, your omega-9 here, your omega-6, omega-3 there. So Udo Erasmus, he quotes a study where they took a plant grown in the Mediterranean and it was very high in omega-9. The same species of plant grown higher up, it was higher in omega-6. Same species of plant grown right up the top, it was higher in omega-3. So we should be eating food that's grown in our area at that time of the year because it's perfectly designed for our body's needs in that season and at that time of the year. Predominantly, we should be getting our fats from the food we eat, so our polyunsaturated fats, because they are so fragile and easily destroyed, we should just be getting them from the food that we eat. And we will when we're eating our seeds and our nuts, our avocados. And if we do use an oil, ideally it should be either the coconut oil or the olive oil. Olive oil should be bought as a first cold-pressed olive oil in a dark bottle or a dark tin, because it does have one empty spot, one double bond, so it can be destroyed by light, heat and oxygen. I stayed in Italy about a month ago. In northern Italy, I was right up high. To get flat land, they have to sort of build up the areas and make steps. And there was olive trees all around. And they send all their olives to a local factory that cold extracts their oil. And they gave me some oil. It was delicious. Depending on your taste, we've had cooks that are from Fiji, they love the coconut oil, so they probably use more coconut oil. Personally, I like the taste of olive oil a little bit better. So when I do a dish, I usually add the olive oil right at the end. So in the lentils, I might have at breakfast time, I cook my lentils, I season them, and just before I serve them, I put the olive oil, mix it around, and then we serve it like that. And I also very much like putting olive oil on my bread. That is the best way to nourish your skin, is to eat adequate amounts of olive oil. It's a very concentrated food, so you only need a little, just a little at a time, but we do need the oils. Udo Erasmus gives the story of a man who went to live with the Eskimos. And he took the SAD diet. You've heard of the SAD diet, the Standard American Diet, which is almost totally deficient in these omegas. Within 2 months, he was getting depressed and even suicidal, and they had to fly him home. So if I was to live with the Eskimos, I'd take a good amount of chia and flaxseed. And traditionally, those people have never had much sun, but they don't suffer from depression because they're having such high amounts of omega-3. But today, there is a disease that's sweeping across the northern countries. It's the SAD disease, the seasonal affective disorder. The seasonal affective disorder is not because of lack of sun. There's never been sun. It's because of a lack of the omega-3s and 6s. These should be taken in a balanced form, and if you take them in the food that you're eating, you will get them in a balanced form. So omega-3 that's found in flaxseed or linseed chia, these foods are high in omega-3 with a little bit of 6 and a touch of 9. Whereas sunflower is higher in 6 with a touch of 3 and a little bit of 9. In his book, Udo Erasmus, he gives a list of all the nuts and seeds and what they contain. So your macadamia nut It has saturated fat with a little bit of mono. The avocado, it has some saturated, some mono, and a little bit of 6. So you'll see that most nuts and seeds are a combination of the different types of fat. It was probably in about the 1920s that a group of scientists were experimenting on their epileptic patients on ways to conquer the epilepsy, and they were fasting them. And when they fasted their epileptic patients, 90% of the seizures stopped, because when you fast, you live on your fat cells. And in the liver, the fat is broken down to ketones. And what they discovered is that ketones are neurohealers, they're neuroprotectors. But you've got to eat. And so what they did is they decided to come up with a diet that mimicked fasting. And they came up with the ketogenic diet. So the ketogenic diet is almost no carbohydrates, no fruits, so no high sugars at all, so lots of vegetables. And Dr. Bruce Fife talks about this in his book, Stop Autism Now, and his other book, Stop Alzheimer's Now, because both of these books are talking about all neurodegenerative diseases in children, that's Stop Autism Now, and all neurodegenerative diseases in adults, that's Stop Alzheimer's Now. And he shows how the ketogenic diet is helping to heal these people. But the ketogenic diet breakfast, what would that be? That'd be 4 eggs, 4 rashers of bacon, and 1/4 pound of butter. See, it's almost impossible to eat. And that's what they found, that it was very difficult for them to stay on it because it's such high fat. And so Dr. Bruce Fife, he suggests the coconut ketogenic diet or the modified Atkins. Interesting with Atkins, he also found that on his diet, which was low carbs, high fibre, generous proteins and fats, his epileptic patients, their seizures didn't come as much. You've probably heard of the keto diet, ketogenic diet. That's basically where it came from. But can you do it on a vegetarian diet? You can. And how you do it is you get the carbohydrates right down. How do you do that? Get your grains right down. Eat lots of vegetables, not as many potatoes though, they're high starch. Daily legumes, even legumes every meal. So what would be a ketogenic breakfast? It would be a bowl of lentils, it might be some steamed spinach, some a sliced tomato and sliced avocado, and about 8 to 10 nuts, and maybe 1/4 cup of pumpkin seeds. So can you see you've got high fibre, you've got some generous proteins there, and he suggests start supplementing with a teaspoon of coconut oil every meal. He says that's 3 times a day. What would lunch be? Lunch would be a salad. Lunch would be some baked sweet potato maybe, and some stir-fry vegetables, and a cup of some sort of legume that's got olive oil in it. And then your dessert is maybe 8 to 10 nuts and 1/4 cup of seeds, and then some coconut oil. So as you can see by my illustration, that's a much easier diet to eat. In his book, Stop Autism Now, he talks about children who overcame their epilepsy on the ketogenic diet. He talks about children who their parents, through helping them with this diet, were able to conquer autism, even attention deficit syndrome, hyperactivity. And in the book, Stop Alzheimer's Now, there are also stories of people who are able to turn their Alzheimer's and dementia around on this ketogenic diet. Dr. Bruce Fife suggests meat and dairy. I suggest legumes, nuts and seeds, and supplementing with the coconut oil. He suggests get up to 3 or 4 teaspoons of coconut oil 3 times a day. Something interesting about the ketogenic diet, No one's dying of heart attacks and no one's having strokes. And yet they're having very generous amounts of fat. I don't eat that much fat. I don't eat coconut oil every day. But if I had any signs of dementia, I think I'd start. So as you can see, the fat's also being used medicinally. Because that coconut oil, because it's so high in the short chain and the medium chain fatty acids, the liver converts it to ketones very quickly. And remember what ketones are, they're neurohealers, they're neuroprotectors. Are there any questions in our last 7 minutes?
Hold on 1 second. We have a few online I want to get to before I forget. Derek says, I have a pinched nerve in my neck that is causing my left arm to be lethargic and unable to grasp things. The doctor is recommending I have surgery. What is your recommendation?
I would go and visit a well-known chiropractor or osteopath. They're the spine experts.
What is the recommendation for acid reflux?
Aha! Did that person see my earlier presentation where I talked about it? It's
yes.
Eating breakfast like a king, lunch like a queen, and at night having a herb tea. And magnesium relaxes that heart muscle, so having magnesium, or what I should say, that cardiac sphincter, which is the reflex muscle.
I understand to drink 1 hour after meals, but any other remedies, and that's what you just said. Also, is it okay to take 1 teaspoon of flaxseed oil daily?
1 teaspoon of flaxseed oil daily, if it's got even a slight taint of bitterness, it means that it's been destroyed. So it should be a sweet oil. That's why I think it's much easier to just grind up your flaxseed and put that on your breakfast.
Amen.
Just wondered about coconut oil. Are you talking about a liquid oil, or I had a container of coconut. I mean, it looked like lard, but of course it wasn't. But so, which kind of what form of coconut?
Coconut oil in the cold weather will always be solid.
Okay.
Because it's a saturated fat. But see, what I do regularly, usually daily, is oil pulling, where I put a teaspoon of coconut oil in my mouth. It's solid when it goes in my mouth, but it's not long before it's liquid. And I swish. I swish for about 10 minutes, and I release it out. It pulls waste out of the tongue, out of the glands under the tongue, and it does it's a wonderful tonic effect for the gums. One man said to me, is it all right for me to warm up the coconut oil in the microwave before I oil pull? I said, there's no need, it'll melt in your mouth. So that's what the saturated fat does. When you heat it, it's liquid. When it's cold, it's solid.
So what about shelf life and the best form to buy coconut oil? Of course, it's solid when you get it. So how long do we need to refrigerate it, or
no,
how long does it keep?
It's light and oxygen resistant. It'll keep for years because it doesn't deteriorate.
I have a couple questions, but they're all kind of related. So I had a Whipple procedure for pancreatic cancer, and I had pancreatic insufficiency, difficulty digesting any fats, even MCT oil, and chronic bathroom issues. I will try the slippery elm. And I've lost about 30% of my body weight. I'm unable to gain weight. I'm currently on TPN now. And should I try the plant-based keto diet?
You certainly could. You certainly could.
Would that give me enough calories, do you think? Because I eat a lot, but I just can't gain.
Yeah.
Okay. And how many meals a day do you think I should eat? Because sometimes they tell me I should eat all day long, and some other, I was eating 2 meals a day before I got my diagnosis.
I guess you just, whatever works.
Okay. And does the TPN help, or is that just a hindrance?
So the TPN, that's being fed IV, is that right?
Yeah, they want me to gain 10 pounds because I just can't gain anything.
Yeah,
I maintain.
I don't think it's that necessary to gain 10 pounds. A lot is made of weight. Healing the gut will automatically help you gain weight.
Okay, thank you.
What would you recommend as a natural remedy for Barrett's esophagus syndrome? Any tea or spice?
So this is very similar to the reflux, yeah?
Mm-hmm. I think so. I believe it's, I'm asking for someone. Give me just one.
So you'd have to explain in a little bit more detail the symptoms.
It says that having this condition means that tissue in the esophagus has changed to a type of tissue that is found in the intestine.
The slippery elm is the healer for the lining. So before breakfast and before going to sleep at night, the slippery elm coats and soothes that esophagus.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. How do you know the formula for knowing if the store oil is beneficial still and the bonds are not destructive?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
The oil that we buy in
Yeah.
the stores, how do we know that it was not exposed to light, heat, and so on, and it's still good? It does good to us instead
Well,
of...
the only oil that is extracted with cold pressed usually is the olive. And it will say on the tin or the bottle, first cold pressed, extra virgin, and then you'll know it's been cold pressed.
Okay, let me tell you what I've been hearing from a doctor explaining. He said that if we read on the label monosaturated number over polysaturated number and it equals 6 or more, it's still good. What do you say about that?
I don't know what he means.
You don't know what he means?
I don't know what that
Okay.
means. But you see that these other oils, they can only be used. The oils from the seeds, they can't be pressed out like the women could press with the flesh in the almond and the olive and the coconut. So the hard seeds are always using high heat to extract them, and that destroys them.
Does it make a difference if it's refined or unrefined coconut oil?
Well, it is best to have the unrefined.
What was the name of the book that Udo Rasmus wrote?
Fats that heal, fats that kill.
Thank you.
What was the name of the book from Dr. Beaumont?
The
name of the book from was it Beaumont that you spoke of in the first presentation?
Yes. This book is out of print. It's a long name. It's Thorough Observations and Deductions on the Physiology of Digestion. It's this great big long name by Dr. William Beaumont. But as I said to you, that it is out of print, but Amazon found it for me in a state college library in the southern states of America. So I don't know if you'll find one. And it is written in Old English, but I found it very fascinating, and it didn't bother me because I'm used to reading the King James Version of the Bible.
I have 2 questions. The first one is, I understand that the ketogenic diet is very beneficial for many individuals suffering from certain illnesses, but the fruits that God created that also have minerals and vitamins that our bodies need. How do you incorporate that as well?
The ketogenic diet is a medicinal diet for certain conditions. And I mentioned on another night that basically is the diet that we put people on who have cancer, and cancer cells consume 15 times the rate of any other cell. And so usually they just go on it for 6 weeks. So the design is to create a diet that is low in sugars so the cancer cells cannot survive. I don't have any health conditions. I eat fruit every day. So it depends on your situation, depends on your health status. For people with diabetes, they should be eating low glycemic index fruits. And the conditions that I just described to you, the neurological conditions, it's not that they don't eat fruit, they would eat, again, the low sugar fruits. So the adjustments happen in accordance with your health status. And absolutely, God made fruit fantastic, but if someone has diabetes, want to lose weight, have cancer, they need to get that right down.
And my second question is, have you heard of the supplement betaine hydrochloric? Wait, let me pronounce that correctly.
It's betaine hydrochloride.
Yes, with pepsin. Is that good as well to increase the...
Yeah, betaine hydrochloride is an extract from beetroot, and it can boost the hydrochloric acid.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
It says, thank you for all the information, Barbara, you've been sharing. Our family has been so blessed. Our son has several health issues. He was born at 31 weeks. Several bouts of acute respiratory distress, including hospitalization, intubation, and coded once. Diagnosed with asthma, he's only 6 years old. Weight gain is a serious issue for him. He only weighs 38 pounds after a lot of effort just to get him there. He's happy, active, and not a picky eater. Any suggestions for weight gain and respiratory strength?
Yes. Stopping the 5 allergens is important, and making sure that the child just eats at mealtime. Some people think if their children are a little underweight, and most children that people consider underweight, I don't. In fact, when I was a little girl, all kids were skinny. Today, a lot of children are overweight. Now, you never hear people complaining of that, but skinny kids are healthy kids. And if he's very, very active and he's eating well, to me, it's not a real problem. There's more of a problem with overweight than underweight, far more of a problem with that.
Amen. Take our couple more.
I have 2 questions. Oats are considered an allergen. What about oat groats? Because I cook that overnight, usually with my cereal. Are those okay?
Some people can handle them very well. I find in the people that I meet in our health retreats, about 30% of people can't handle oats. So that's 70% of people can. If you love oats, you enjoy oats, you have no health problems, eat oats. Okay. But if someone has a serious condition, it is advisable that they cease the oats until they conquer their health problem, and then maybe the oats can be the first thing to be reintroduced, and their body will quickly tell them if it's happy with them or not. But they need long, slow cooking.
Right, that's what I do. I cook them overnight, the groats. But is that okay for a diabetic?
Should be.
Okay. The other question is, there's a product that we've been using. It's Mayoko's Organic Cultured Vegan Butter. Have you heard of that?
No.
We've been using that, and you were talking about butter and margarine is not good, so I'm wondering.
Well, you'd have to just look at the label.
Okay.
But if it's solid, it's got a saturated fat in it, it's solid because of the saturated fat. And the saturated fats are your coconut or your palm oil or your cocoa butters. If it's got that in it, it's saturated because of that. But if the label only talks about liquid oils, then it's probably been hydrogenated.
Okay.
So you would investigate why it's solid.
Okay.
Take our last question.
What do you do for a child that has cystic fibrosis?
For cystic
Fibrosis.
Cystic fibrosis. For the person that has that, I would advise they watch my lecture on the hormones and balance the hormones. It also depends on where the cystic fibrosis is, and the castor oil compresses can help to break down that fibrous tissue. I always investigate history, exposure to chemicals, or if it's in the lungs, if a person's been breathing in molds or chemicals in their work. So disease just doesn't happen. There's always a reason, and sometimes you have to go way back and have a look at the links. Discovering the cause doesn't mean, of course, you've got an instant cure, but it just explains why it's there. And it's like the two men I talked about who had serious accidents. They will never be as they were. And sometimes people have had serious things happen to them in other ways, and they will never be as they were. But if they can manage the situation, they're doing well.